I paid $4.2 million for that jet. My name was engraved on the side next to my husband's like a promise carved into metal. Yesterday, I was quietly removed from the passenger list to make room for his sister. No warning, no apology, just a text. Lauren needs it more. As if I were luggage, as if my success was temporary, borrowed, undeserved. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I opened a private account I hadn't touched in 7 years and started rewriting the flight plan, not just for the jet, for everything. I used to think building a company from nothing was the hardest thing I'd ever do. Turns out it was easier than noticing when your marriage becomes a stage play, one where you're the only one who forgot it's all scripted. 2 weeks ago, Forbes placed me on the 100 Women Shaping the Future list. The cover photo was perfect. Me in a power suit, jet in the background, the wind doing exactly what the stylist wanted it to do. The caption read, "From self-made to CEO royalty." I smiled at the headline, but not because it was true. I smiled because it used to be. At the press conference that followed, cameras flashed and journalists leaned in, recording every polished word. Ryan stood beside me, all charm and confidence, holding the microphone with the ease of someone who believed the world owed him applause. "I want to thank the people who made this possible," he said, glancing at the crowd, then directly at the camera. "Especially my mother, who taught me how to dream and never settle." Not one mention of me. Not my name, not my work, not even a vague nod to the woman who built the foundation he now strutted across. Just a smile, turned toward the camera, like we were co-actors in a success story written by someone else. I didn't flinch. I knew how to keep my face still. What the world saw was a composed, supportive wife. What they missed was the moment I stopped being surprised. Later that week, I was supposed to fly to Geneva for a partner summit, something we'd planned for months. I'd arranged every meeting, confirmed every investor, built the pitch deck slide by slide while Ryan played squash and took care of family politics. The jet had my initials painted next to his. It was as much mine as it was his. So when my assistant called in a panic, "You've been taken off the manifest, Ms. Summers," I thought it was a glitch. It wasn't. I called Ryan. "Lauren needs it more," he said simply, like he was changing the lunch order. "She's going through something. You can take commercial." "Why didn't you ask me first?" I asked, careful to keep my voice low. I was in the office and walls here had ears. "It's just one trip. Don't make it a thing." He hung up before I could respond. At first, I sat still, phone in my lap, heart oddly quiet. Then I walked over to the mirror by my office window. I looked like a CEO. I looked like someone in control. But that was the illusion, wasn't it? When I tried to access the flight logs through the company system, my credentials failed. Password reset, unauthorized. Even my financial dashboard, my own company, was temporarily restricted for administrative review. Administrative review. I built this empire. I coded the first version of the app on a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen and one working USB port. I pitched investors out of cafes. I mortgaged my first condo to pay for a manufacturing test run that nearly bankrupted me. Ryan joined when we were already on the way up. He married me during Series B. I used to think it was love. Now I wondered if it was just timing. I didn't cry, I didn't storm into his office, I didn't text a friend or post a vague quote on Instagram. Instead, I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a black leather planner. 7 years ago, right before we got married, I met with a financial advisor on the advice of a mentor. He was discreet. He created a fund in my maiden name, untraceable, untouchable, and entirely mine. I hadn't opened that account since, but now, sitting alone in my office while my husband flew my jet to Paris with his sister, I logged in. The numbers blinked back at me. Strong, quiet, ready. I exhaled, long and slow. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I smiled. I didn't show up to the Monday meeting, or the Tuesday one. By Wednesday, someone sent flowers to my office with a card that read, Take all the time you need. We've got this. No signature, but the handwriting was Ryan's. Confident, slanted to the right, as if even his apologies leaned away from him. I let the silence settle. People filled empty spaces with their own assumptions. They said I was tired, that the summit cancellation had hit me hard, that maybe I wasn't cut out for long-term leadership. It was easier to believe I was unraveling than to suspect I was watching. I turned off my phone for 3 days and drove up to Sonoma, to a quiet little vineyard where no one knew my name. But I didn't come for wine. I came to meet the one person I trusted with the truth, Marcus Lane. He was the financial lawyer who'd helped me establish my private fund before my wedding. Back then, he'd warned me, it's not about love, it's about control. Have a safety exit even in the happiest chapter. I laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now. Marcus listened, no judgment in his eyes. When I finished explaining what happened, he leaned back and asked just one question. Are you ready to do this your way? I didn't hesitate. Yes. The first step was information. He handed me a sleek black drive, labeled only with a red dot. Inside were audio files, old recordings from board meetings, strategy calls, even family retreats I hadn't attended. Ryan had always insisted on recording for documentation. I never realized who controlled the archives. I listened to one file 3 times. Susan, my mother-in-law, was speaking. Elena's a temporary dream. She gave us scale. Now we need structure. Then Lauren chimed in, laughter in her voice. We'll give her a nice exit. Make it look like she chose it. The silence after that burned more than the words. They didn't think I was listening. Perfect. By Friday, I was back in the city. I walked into a meeting with one of our smaller shareholders, an older woman named Doris, who had always sided with Susan during boardroom debates. I brought her a bottle of rare bourbon her husband once told me he loved. We talked about the weather, about legacy, about what the company meant to people like us, who had risked everything. By the end of lunch, Doris signed a quiet agreement. Her shares would transfer to an anonymous holding for an undisclosed exit offer. She never asked who bought them. I did the same with 2 more shareholders over the weekend. All quiet, all polite, all under market price, but with incentives too subtle to resist. One needed help paying off a granddaughter's medical bills. Another wanted to move abroad but feared capital gains taxes. I solved each problem. No lawyers, no noise. By Monday morning, the tide had shifted, but no one noticed yet. That same day, an article appeared on a mid-tier business blog. Is Elena Summers stepping down? It quoted unnamed sources and claimed I was in talks to transition out gracefully to focus on wellness. It noted declining visibility, missed meetings, and lack of engagement from me. Ryan reposted it within the hour. I smiled because I had written it. Under a pseudonym with Marcus helping mask the digital trail. It wasn't slander, it was strategy. I needed them to relax, to think I was fading. People let their guard down when they believe the threat is gone. That week, Ryan announced he would be taking a personal leave to support his sister's executive transition. Lauren was named interim CEO. The press clapped. Investors stayed quiet. I watched and waited. 3 days into Lauren's leadership, the jet was grounded. Official notice, asset freeze under IRS audit, suspicion of misfiled ownership claims and unpaid luxury taxes. Lauren had insisted on putting it under her name last year, claiming it would streamline operations. Now she owned the liability. Every cent. Ryan called me the next day, frantic. Do you know what's going on with the jet? I kept my voice calm. I thought Lauren needed it more. Silence. Then he hung up. In that quiet, I realized something. They had never actually listened to me. Not when I spoke, not when I asked. But now that I had chosen silence, every move I made echoed louder than their words ever did. The presentation appeared in the internal system at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. No sender, no author name, just a subject line. Operational irregularities. Q1, Q3. Lauren's assistant was the first to see it. She forwarded it to Ryan before even opening the file. Within minutes, it spread through the entire executive board. 72 slides, all clean, precise. Coded transactions, layered shell payments, consulting fees to non-existent vendors, all traced back to Lauren's executive access card. The paper trail was surgical, the kind of thing that could only be built by someone who'd once designed the system itself. By noon, Ryan had canceled his personal leave and flown back from Palm Springs. The next board meeting was called in under 48 hours. I didn't attend in person. Instead, I scheduled a secure video call. I sat in a private room, plain white wall behind me, the company's logo frosted subtly on the glass. When the board logged in, faces blinking one by one onto the screen, I didn't offer greetings. I didn't nod or ask about their weekends. I simply said, Im lang hong, fai yu joy, no la koang trong jika hach tu fa hui. Then I ended the call. That was it. But something in those 12 words lit a fire beneath the table. Lauren spent most of that day in closed-door meetings with legal. Ryan shouted at someone in the hallway loud enough for the receptionist to hear, "I told you not to touch the vendor list." Whispers moved faster than facts. Staff who used to smile tightly when I passed them now looked like they were bracing for a storm. And for once, it wasn't me they were afraid of. Lauren tried to host an emergency press conference on Saturday to clarify misinformation, but no media outlet showed. Instead, the story had already taken on a life of its own. That night, Marcus sent me a single-line message. "Stage is ready. Dit." Monday morning, I logged into a different platform, one that most of the board didn't even know existed. Back when I purchased the jet, I'd incorporated it through a separate entity, Jetstorm Holdings, a strategic move, just in case. Marcus had helped structure it so that Jetstorm was never directly listed as a subsidiary of the main company. Now I transferred full ownership from Jetstorm to an educational nonprofit. I didn't need the jet anymore. I needed the story. At 8 a.m., a memo was released to internal stakeholders. Jet Asset is no longer owned by Summers Enterprises. Ownership legally transferred with 0 remaining liabilities. Translation: all the pending investigations tied to the jet were no longer the company's problem, but Lauren's name was still on the IRS audit list. By midday, I filed a formal lawsuit against the company for negligent governance and breach of shareholder fiduciary duty. The plaintiff? A silent investor holding 4% of voting rights, recently acquired through secondary market consolidation. That investor was me, a new name, a new entity, but the same eyes behind the curtain. Ryan was blindsided. He stormed into the boardroom demanding to know who had sold shares to this ghost fund. No one answered, because no one truly knew. I watched the chaos unfold from a distance. Lauren held a company-wide virtual meeting, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke about transparency and rebuilding trust. But her hand shook as she reached for water. She wore a silk blouse too crisp, makeup too thick, smile too wide. It was the face of someone performing confidence while drowning. Later that week, Ryan's access to the company systems was revoked. The board had voted unanimously to suspend him indefinitely pending investigation. His name disappeared from the website by morning. Lauren resigned 2 days later. The statement said, "for personal reasons." But everyone knew better. Internal messages leaked. A voice recording, too. Her voice unmistakably slurring over dinner, bragging about driving that woman out of her own empire. Susan, my mother-in-law, vanished from the media landscape completely. Her weekly appearances on business panels ceased. Her foundation's donation link was quietly taken down. Her silence was louder than any press release. And I went to lunch at my usual corner cafe, ordered my usual black coffee, extra shot, sat at my usual table by the window. No one recognized me, and I liked it that way. Sometimes power doesn't look like fireworks or courtrooms or screaming victories. Sometimes it looks like walking away while the stage burns behind you and knowing you lit the match with your eyes closed. For months, the world thought I had vanished. No interviews, no photo ops, no celebratory press release claiming victory, just silence. Clean, uninterrupted silence. But in the quiet, something else was forming. It started with an email, then a second, then 20. Women who had once run departments, shaped brands, negotiated billion-dollar deals before being replaced, dismissed, or diminished. Some had been pushed out by husbands, others by fathers, brothers, in-laws. All had been told one way or another, "This isn't your space anymore." I didn't seek revenge. I sought redistribution. I flew to Denver unannounced to meet with a woman named Camille. She'd built a logistics platform from her garage before her husband forced her to sign over control, then rebranded the company under his name. The board claimed she was emotionally inconsistent. I listened to her story over black coffee and stale hotel toast. At the end, I asked her one question. Would you build again if no one could take it away this time? She said yes. By the third month, there were 12 women, then 21, then 42. We called it the Hollow Network, a quiet engine of startups, structured like interlocking gears. No company could dominate the others, no outside majority shareholders. Each founder held permanent voting rights that couldn't be stripped by marriage, inheritance, or boardroom betrayal. Funding came from The Vault, my original private fund, now expanded through undisclosed partners who believed in the vision, but not the spotlight. We didn't announce anything. No splashy LinkedIn posts, no TED Talks. We just built. And slowly, the world noticed. Whispers started. Who's backing all these female-led stealth companies? Business blogs speculated it was a new kind of venture firm. One article dubbed me the Quiet Rebuilder. I didn't correct them, because they were half right. But it wasn't just about building again. It was about building beyond reach. Meanwhile, Ryan tried to contact me. 10 missed calls, 2 letters handwritten like that would change the ink inside the past. He used to sign emails with "always yours." Now it was just "please." I never responded. But one morning, a small padded envelope arrived at Marcus's office. Inside was a flash drive, no label, just a note. "This found its way to me. Thought you should decide what to do with it." I plugged it into a burner laptop. The file was dated 7 years ago, a recording. The first voice was Susan's. She's ambitious, I'll give her that. But you know what ambition does without control? It burns itself out. Then Ryan's voice. "Let her burn. I'll get what we need. Then one day we'll take it all back." Susan chuckled. "Just make sure she believes it was always her idea." I sat there for a long time, staring at the paused waveform on screen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I forwarded the file to Ryan's personal inbox. No message, no subject line. That was enough. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. One line. I was young. I didn't mean any of it. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked out to the runway where my new jet waited. Sleek, quiet, silver gray with matte black accents. No gold trim, no initials, just 2 words painted near the door in clean block letters. Not yours. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, it was quiet. I sat near the window, looking out as the tarmac blurred behind us. This wasn't about escape. It was about choice. I could go anywhere, but I didn't want to go back. As we ascended, I thought about the word legacy. People always talked about it like a monument, something carved in stone, put in museums or textbooks. But legacy could be fluid. Legacy could be a whisper passed between women in rooms no one expected them to be in. Legacy could look like 42 companies that weren't named after any man. Legacy could look like silence, repurposed into steel. By the time the plane leveled out, I had a new name for the next phase. Phase 2, rewrite. Not rebuild, rewrite. Because we weren't just fixing what they broke. We were designing a world where they never had the pen in the first place. He asked to meet in person. The message came through a mutual connection, an old lawyer who used to draft our joint press releases. The note was brief, formal, a ghost of the man who used to send me midnight poems and espresso orders during product launches. He wanted to meet at a park, public, safe, neutral. I chose the time. I chose the place. That was the last piece of control I allowed him to hold, and even that was curated. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting on the edge of a wooden bench under a tree that had shed most of its leaves. Fall had a way of making things honest. No flowers, no flourishes, just bare branches and cold light. Ryan stood when he saw me. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but energetically, like someone who no longer believed in their own gravity. "Elena," he said, not "hey," not "hi." Just my name, like it was something he didn't have the right to decorate anymore. I didn't sit. "I just wanted to say," he began, voice trembling slightly. "I was stupid, young, caught between things I didn't understand. I let my mother—" He stopped, swallowed. "I let her shape the way I saw you, and it was wrong." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout of the audio recording I'd sent. My words, his voice, Susan's laugh, all captured in typed lines. "I listened to it 12 times, he said, "and I hated myself more every time." He looked at me then, eyes wide, wet, waiting. "I still love you," he whispered. I never stopped. I stared at him, at the man I once thought was the safest place I'd ever landed, at the man who had helped me pick out silverware and baby names and jet interiors, at the man who once said, "We'll always be equal, 50-50 in all things," while quietly learning how to erase the numbers behind my back. I said nothing. Instead, I stepped closer, just enough for my voice to land like glass on stone. "If I had no money," I asked, "would you still love me?" He froze, his mouth parted slightly, not in shock, in calculation. I stepped back before he could try to answer, because the silence was the only truth he'd ever given me. I left him there, standing under the skeleton of a maple tree, surrounded by memories he no longer owned. That night, I finalized the paperwork. Ryan's name had still lingered in 2 of my legacy trusts, vestiges of a past life buried deep in estate clauses and early-stage agreements. Most people would have ignored it, written it off as a symbolic leftover. I didn't. I sat with Marcus and combed through every contract, every clause. We reversed, revised, revoked, not out of spite, but out of precision. I wanted no trace of debt attached to his name, not emotional, not financial. Then I created something new, a trust, untitled, faceless, silent, funded through a network of cloaked transactions. Its purpose was clear: to support women who had been coerced, threatened, or manipulated into marriage by financial pressure. No photos, no donor galas, just money, real, immediate, unrestricted. One of the first recipients was a young woman in rural Nebraska, barely 21, whose parents had forced her into marriage with a 43-year-old investor to save the farm. She used the funds to annul the marriage, hire a lawyer, and enroll in community college. She sent no thank you letter. That was fine. Gratitude wasn't the point. Freedom was. When news of the trust leaked, because it always does, the internet split. Some praised it as a revolution. Others called it an overcorrection. One commentator labeled it weaponized feminism dressed in philanthropy. I said nothing. Let them argue. Meanwhile, I disappeared. I deleted Instagram, shut down my public email, declined all press requests, no book deals, no brand extensions, not even a podcast. Power wasn't meant to be a performance. It was meant to be quiet. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Ryan in headlines, spotted at a benefit, seen with someone new, trying to rebuild his image. He always looked tired, not aged, just hollow. Susan never reappeared. Her foundation dissolved quietly like a whisper no one wanted to remember. And me? I planted lavender on a quiet cliffside house in a country where no one pronounced my name correctly. I walked barefoot most days, ate simple food, read complicated books, no legacy to manage, no throne to protect, just peace. But peace, I learned, was its own kind of price. Not because it costs something to have, but because it costs everything not to need the applause anymore. The letter came folded in thirds, written on lined paper with slightly shaky handwriting. Ink smudges clung to the corners, like the writer had pressed too hard while trying to make her words matter. "Dear whoever you are," it began. "I don't know your name. They said it was anonymous, but I wanted to thank you anyway. I got the scholarship. I'm the first girl in my orphanage to study business. I want to start a tea company. I want to make women feel safe." I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it inside a worn leather notebook I kept locked in the bottom drawer of my desk. The drawer didn't have much: some old Polaroids, a broken compass, and the blueprint for a company that never launched. I no longer needed the launch because I had chosen something else. The village was small, tucked along the curve of a mist-covered valley in northern Europe. No press, no politics, just fog and farmers and the sound of bells every morning from the chapel across the hill. Here, they called me Elena. They didn't ask where I came from. They only knew I taught economics at the local vocational school, helped with harvests during festivals, and always wore black sweaters, even in spring. There was a tiny schoolhouse on the edge of the village, stone walls, one crooked chimney, a wooden sign above the door that read, in clean serif lettering, "Founded by ES." No one asked what ES stood for, but they respected it. Sometimes I missed the rush. Boardrooms, strategy sessions, the violent clarity of deal-making. But that version of me belonged to a life that had closed its doors behind me. I didn't need to return, because the echo of what I built still moved without me. And sometimes, that was the purest kind of power. Then came the video. I wasn't looking for it. It found me, as viral things do, sent by a former assistant who still forwarded me industry gossip out of habit. The footage was low-res, phone-recorded, barely lit. It showed a woman in an apron carrying a tray at a roadside diner in the outskirts of Arizona. Her name tag read, Lauren. Someone filming whispered, "Wait, is that?" The video cut off. It racked up 1 million views in 24 hours. Comment sections flared with curiosity, mockery, pity. But I didn't watch it again. Instead, I closed my laptop and went outside. The sky had opened that day, rare and sharp, no clouds to shield the mountains. I stood barefoot in the grass and let the silence soak into my skin. Later, a journalist emailed asking for comment. I deleted it. Power was knowing you didn't need the last word. Then came the next headline. Former CEO Ryan Summers lists estate at 3-point tier, living alone. No new ventures, no new partners, just faded portraits in echoing halls. The man who once ran meetings like a stage show now barely left his property. They said his house echoed. They said he talked to himself during walks. They said the lawn grew too long before anyone noticed. Someone, somewhere, posted an old quote of mine. It wasn't from a press conference. It wasn't from a speech. It was from a moment they weren't supposed to hear. Don't ever assume the silent ones don't carry knives. They're just waiting for the right place to cut. The quote spread like wildfire. It became a tagline on posters, a tattoo on someone's collarbone, a caption under a photo of a woman in a courtroom walking out of a marriage with her head high and her hands free. They didn't always know it was mine, and that was perfect, because it didn't need to be. My words had outlived my name. My actions had become myth. And somewhere, in a dozen cities, in quiet apartments above restaurants, in dusty classrooms in places maps forget, young women were passing that phrase to each other, not as revenge, but as reminder. That power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves like a whisper through locked doors. Sometimes it walks away, without fanfare, without a spotlight, and still changes everything.